Please help save the chickens. Chickens need food, shelter, and bail money after Miami cops were caught on video choking the chicken. This poor chicken was arrested for clucking in a public park. No, seriously, here's the police report. In 2001, then Miami Mayor Joe Carollo was arrested for domestic violence after throwing a tea box at his second wife's face, leaving a golf ball-sized welt by her eye. Their 10-year-old daughter frantically dialed 911.
Oh, help, my dad's hurting my mom.
What happened?
Oh, my dad's hurting my mom.
Over 20 years later, now Commissioner Carollo continues to abuse the people of Miami, most recently misappropriating nearly $1 million tax dollars for his fourth wife's hideous public art project. And now this wannabe tin pot dictator is using the police to turn a public park into a cockfighting ring. So help these peaceful chickens fly the coop and exercise their First Amendment rights. Go to pollocarollo.com. Use coupon code COMAMIERDA to save $305. Literally, bro.
I'm Ron McGill. Please, help save the chickens.
We start off with a bang around here because public complainer, rabble-rouser, attention-seeker Billy Corben made a public mess involving chickens last week. You embarrassed Joe Carollo and his fourth wife and his fourth wife's art. You blasphemed against all of it. Tell the people here what happened with this idea, what it was that you were trying to accomplish by taunting Joe Carollo and the police force with your chicken.
Que rollo formaste con los pollos, Carollo. I mean, he made a cluster out of this very minor, peaceful demonstration. There was this major event to launch this cat and dog sculpture installation in a public park that Joe Carollo misappropriated nearly $1 million tax dollars on, gave it to his wife. In fact, one of the members of the Bayfront Park Trust, Christina Paloma, in 2021, resigned over this because he showed up to a meeting without an item on the agenda, just said, give my wife $1 million and let her spend it however she wants with no oversight or accountability. And so Christina Paloma just resigned. She's like, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't fair if this guy can just do whatever he wants like a tin pot dictator. But it gets worse because he had this chicken arrested, which was absolutely outrageous.
Ideal for you, though. If you're sending chickens chickens to protest, the ideal scenario for Billy Corben is for a big public mess to be made because he ends up being teapot dictator who arrests the chicken.
There was no intent to disrupt. There was no actual disruption. The chickens walked through the crowd, much to the delight of the children. They were passing out to the crowd in attendance in a public park at a public event. The public was invited to. The public paid for, by the way. They were handing out white tank tops with a photo of Joe Carollo's mugshot from his domestic violence arrest. Yes, they were literally Joe Carollo wife beaters. And the audience was... And the crowd, by the way, this wasn't like an audience and event. It was just people walking through the park. They were delighted.
Joe Carollo is a wife beater and people corrupt. Those are the two worst things ever. Truly. Fuck this man. For real. Fuck this guy. Yeah. I can't wait for this.
Delighted with the chickens, delighted with the tank tops. The chickens were holding up a sign, and this wasn't about public safety. This wasn't about a disruption. The chickens could not be heard clucking over the music and the amplification system.
The police report says that they could be heard clucking.
They could be heard if you were standing right next to them, which the police immediately surrounded these four chickens, which were adults dressed in ridiculous chicken costumes, wearing the Joe Carollo wife beaters. This wasn't done for public safety. It wasn't done because the crowd was being disrupted in any way. This was done because one man, Joe Carollo, could see these chickens and could see these signs off to the side on a sidewalk, and the police knew that Joe Carollo wanted to make an example out of someone, not because it was legal, not because it was constitutional. And in fact, I got threatened with arrest not once but twice with unlawful orders from one particular police officer.
Back up that way. Back up. You will be arrested if you go into my scene right now. You get what I'm saying?
I get it. I'm right here.
All
I'm right here.
Okay, stay right there. Don't go in.
All good. Yeah. Don't go into a scene packed with people in a public place. This was a total unnecessary escalation by the Miami police. And even while they were taking him away to his car, through people, a public gathering on the street, cars driving by, he said this.
If you follow us to my vehicle, I will put you in the back of it.
Ridiculous.
That was a bit threatening, actually.
Ridiculous.
The video, the person, who was the video that was, who was taking that video that was threatened?
I was.
And you were threatened with arrest right there.
Yeah, he said, if you follow me to the car, I'll put you in the back of it, which is, again, not lawful, not constitutional.
I didn't know that was you, though. When I saw the video, I thought you had somebody, just like I didn't think it was you in the chicken costume.
It wasn't me in the chicken costume.
I did not think that you were the one being threatened by that police officer with arrest for videoing the chicken being arrested, which is what you were there for.
Okay, we keep talking about the chicken. It's disrespectful. The chicken was Dr. Morgan Gianola. He is a postdoctoral scholar for behavioral medicine research in cardiovascular diseases at the University of Miami. Very well liked, very well respected. He's also obviously an activist who was participating in this peaceful protest. He has no criminal record. And now you have, Pollo Carollo and his Gestapo violating his constitutional rights. I have complimented the current chief of the latest chief of police. How many chiefs have we had over the last 3 years? But Manny Morales, I thought, was a decent man, gave an absolutely absurd bullshit statement to the press about how disruptive the chickens were. They weren't. It's all on video. And I'm very disappointed in him. But what could we really expect from a police chief who was sworn in right after that ridiculous show trial defamation and termination of Chief Acevedo, who called out the corruption at City Hall, including of Joe Carollo. And Joe Carollo, at this swearing in of Chief Manny Morales, plays a very familiar song on his cell phone.
Thank you, everyone. It's definitely not ideal conditions, but I'm honored and humble. I have been a servant of the city of Miami. Oh! I've been a humble servant of the city of Miami for 28 years, and I look forward to the next chapter. I look forward to getting to know the residents, the visitors, and the administration on a deeper level. Like I said, I welcome everyone in the city to share their thoughts.
There he is playing the Godfather theme, because you'll remember that R. Acevedo, the previous police chief, referred to the city of Miami as a mafia. And so Joe Carollo steering into that curve.
Brazenly taunting everybody at that police chief's introduction.
It sent a message of impunity to the department, which, as we know, has been falling apart in terms of morale. We had a 34-year veteran of the department, Sergeant Garcia, who signed off a few weeks ago on the radio. We played that right after it happened on this program, basically saying command staff is a mess, the department's a mess, morale is in the toilet. I'm out. Deuces. And so this is what's happening over there. And it's no wonder that this is just that Miami cannot help but violate the constitutional rights of people, not just the police department, but the city every single day. And I think what we're going to need to do is perhaps the police will unveil a new police car to celebrate Chicken History Month.
All right.
Chicken History Month.
Enough with the police car.
So did the chicken get bailed out?
Yes, the chicken flew the coop, fortunately, and now is awaiting the state attorney to make a decision about those charges. I don't know what she's going to do. I mean, obviously, dragging this out seems rather absurd. I think all the video evidence runs contradictory to what the police claim had occurred.
You're a public agitator. You've publicly agitated, and Joe Carollo, who has had a feud with you for many, many years now, was publicly embarrassed by this incident.
I think most importantly, nobody is talking about the cats and dogs that were a total waste of money and misappropriation of our funds. Considering at Bayfront Park, the fountain, the big fountain right in front, has been busted for 10 years, and they've done nothing about it. You have clowns like County Commissioner Keon Hardeman saying, If anybody has anything negative to say about this, how dare you? To me today, Commissioner Carollo gave all of us in Miami our flowers. This guy is as corrupt as the day is long and is totally...
It is brazen, though. It is brazen to give an art sculpture to your fourth wife. Like, that's...
And nobody cares about these dogs and cats. It's all about the chickens. And I will tell you, these chickens made an appearance when Ken Russell announced his run for Congress last year. It was a very funny video. It got, circulated through kind of like yokel political circles, but didn't go anywhere because of this totally unlawful extrajudicial arrest of this chicken. It has now been the lead story on Channel 10, on Channel 6, the Miami Herald, Political Cortadito, Raul Martinez.
I'm enjoying you playing this straight. I'm enjoying you. You're sitting here and with a straight face, you're looking at me as if this unconstitutional thing isn't exactly what you wanted to happen. You're pretending. You are faking this.
Joe Carollo is a bully. He bullied his family. He's bullied the people of Miami. And now he's bullying this chicken.
Little Billy Corben.
Oh, you had the other one. There's a better one.
Little Billy Cohen time.
No, not that one. The new one.
Little Billy now doesn't like any of us.
No, not that one.
This is on your little Twitter account, Little Billy.
Come on, that was worth the squeeze, wasn't it?
The Twitter account, the Twitter account. Let's hear it again. This is Carollo at the latest city commission meeting.
No.
This is on your little Twitter account, Little Billy.
If dictators could be clowns, this guy is, pollo payaso.
Billy, end of the month, and you are used to losing these things. You tell people, please, you're choosing from among the best of evil and bad options, but choose the best. District 2 has 13 candidates in it, and you've got an election coming at the end of the month. What's important for people to know, because this is critical timing?
It's practically a situation where almost anyone who wins, the people lose. But I win because it tends to be fun content and fodder for our show. Speaking of which, you'll remember we interviewed Dixie Dent, who was the former judicial assistant for Martin Zilber, who's running in this race. He was a judge who resigned in disgrace after she complained about him. I was so taken with her story that I did a kind of a mini documentary about her.
There is a systematic corruption in Miami-Dade County. It's very much what Cuba is like. Who you know is what's going to get you somewhere. Judge Zober was a part of the Miami Mafia, the elite boys club of Miami-Dade County.
A Miami-Dade judge resigned amid reports he made his staff run personal errands, as well as skipping work 51 days without notifying superiors.
The State Judicial Qualifications Commission found he was AWOL from his job. Just some of the misconduct he's admitted.
The judge agreed to being suspended and paying a steep fine.
The experience of working for Judge Martin Zilber broke my heart. What I saw is not what justice looks like. Judge Zober defrauded the taxpayers, falsified time records, stating that he was at work when he was on vacation. There were trips to New York, there were trips to Malibu, while he was supposed to be presiding over hearings. Some of these people never saw a day in court. Judge Zober would brag to the bailiff and I about knowingly entering unconstitutional gag orders, unconstitutional orders of foreclosure, and extending the litigation process and making it so much more costly for the litigant. People just like me, who made up his salary, a very healthy salary. Judge Zober also had me illegally work on his re-election campaign. His interest in becoming a judge was solely to pursue a personal agenda, to benefit Judge Zober and benefit his special interests. No one else matters to Judge Zober but Judge Zober. He takes perverse pleasure in hurting others.
Judge Martin Zilber was facing misconduct accusations, including making his pregnant judicial assistant wheel his chair up several floors.
Judge Zober's response was, "It doesn't matter. I'm never going to lose." How do you justify voting for someone who is doing this? And now he's going to be a commissioner of your district?
I would like to make a motion to appoint Martin Zilber.
Commissioner Diaz-Bertia voted for Martin Zilber. Commissioner Carollo voted for Martin Zilber.
I speak out from a standpoint of that little immigrant girl that came to this country under the belief that there was justice here, that we had fundamental rights. The system is broken. And it's further corroded by people like Judge Zilber. Judge Martin Zilber does not belong as a city commissioner. Judge Zilber belongs in jail.
I love this mini doc format because it gives me a chance to kind of continue the tradition of like this mosaic of just Florida fuckery and Miami mayhem. And this guy Zilber is a character right out of one of our raconteur documentaries. And Dan, I have now, as I sit here, I have co-moderated a forum with all 13 candidates, and I have sat down one-on-one with 6 of them to interview them for over a half hour. Zilber, I spoke to for almost 45 minutes because my first question is always the elephant in the room question. Give all the candidates a chance to kind of respond to the Oppo, research and stuff on them. What do you think? So I asked Zilber about these allegations, and to be fair, I'm going to play some excerpts so you can give him a chance to respond to Dixie.
We all know about my past. Let's talk about the other elephant room, on the bench. And I can tell you again, it's just, again, all the allegations were unequivocally false. They weren't true. I enjoyed my time on the bench. It didn't end the way I wanted it to end.
So he says they're unequivocally true, but then later in the same interview, he equivocates.
I'll say it again. I didn't do the majority. There were a few things, yes, that were done all the time. It doesn't make it right. But the majority of the accusations were just, and anything to do with the pregnancy and the way I treated my judicial assistant was completely untrue. But yes, there were some scheduling issues. I was one of the higher performing, better performing judges, but I'm going to keep going with the question. Okay. So unequivocally, but equivocating that some of it was true. So I asked him, why did he agree? He testified under oath in front of the Judicial Qualifications Committee, and he would eventually resign so he wouldn't have to face any consequences, and in fact will collect a public pension later in life for as much as $40,000 a year.
The music was unnecessarily dramatic, I thought.
Man, I love that music, man.
It's good music, but it also gives off the vibe of all these crime shows that you watch that are overdone on television. The music that you chose was unnecessarily dramatically theatrical.
The drums.
I think that if you were watching the video, you might have a slightly different opinion because...
But I'm not.
Her presence is very powerful.
But I'm not.
Her presence is very powerful.
She's weeping and powerful. Her words were very powerful.
Yes.
Again, the music also very powerful, excessively so.
Boom.
Yes, we brought in a timpani drummer to play live percussions, and we didn't have a horn of doom in there, but Zilber, there's no music during Zilber, so you get to make your own.
Well,
you
what
get to
else
make your
do we
own
need
mind.
to know about District 2?
Well,
there are other candidates, 12 other candidates.
Yeah, but we're going to focus on a couple of them today, Dan, because they're polling towards the top of the crop, and they are among the worst in the entire race. But I asked him, why did you agree to a 60-day suspension and a $30,000 fine to pay restitution for the money he allegedly defrauded from the taxpayers? Why would you agree to that? Okay, if you didn't do anything wrong.
It clearly states in there that everything you sign, if you go to trial, if you don't accept the plea, it's done for purposes for plea. You're not admitting to it. So no admission, no saying, yes, I did these things. I entered it for the purposes of plea convenience. Let me finish. To stay on the bench. I was a good judge. I did a good job. The accusations were false. End of story. What else would you like to ask me about it?
Then why agree to pay $30,000 in excess?
It's part of a plea. It was irrelevant. So again, at the time when they asked me, they said...
This isn't a legal proceeding. This is the court of public opinion, and
I just answered your question. I answered your question. You don't like the answer, but I answered the question. I agreed to it because I thought it was the easiest and best way to stay on the bench and move on. It was expedience. End of story. But never did I say that I did something wrong, and I don't maintain to this day I didn't do anything wrong.
What did you testify then to under oath in the January 21 hearing?
I don't know that I remember.
He's like very specific about it.
Yeah, I don't know that I remember what hearing was when. I mean, I think I honestly don't remember. If you want to ask me a question, I'll be glad to tell you. I think what I testified under oath was, yes, I used my bailiff for some of the personal issues, and yes, I had scheduling certain ways on certain, but I truly don't really remember. Once again, I was one of the better judges on the bench. The allegations are false. I resigned because I thought it was the right thing to do. I have nothing else left to say on that subject. What else would you like to ask me about?
You just say some of them were true. You just admitted to some of them.
I'll say it again. I was one of the more efficient, better judges. I'll say it again. I am very proud of how I performed on the bench. I'll just say it again. I did a very good job when I was on the bench.
There was another point that he wanted to really drive home to me. In fact, I don't even know how many times he said it over the 40-plus minutes.
I have no financial interest in any of this. I don't need any of this. I'm doing it because I like public service. It doesn't matter to me if I get $10 or $10 million. I'm happy at the firm I'm in. I'm doing well financially. I wasn't really looking to get back into the world of public service. My attorney and friends on the bench and said, look, you did this, you didn't take this job for money. You took this job because you wanted it. So it's not like you need to leave and do something else. So it didn't matter to me if it was $10,000, $10, $30,000, $50,000, 30 days. You know, thank God I don't need the money. Again, I don't need this. It always costs me money, and it always costs me lifestyle.
First of all, I didn't ask him anything about money. He sounds like me talking about this show, by the way. But what I will,
hey man,
I do want to say, I don't need this. It costs me money, but I'm not doing this for the money. But I have two questions for Zilber on this. One, will he, if he gets elected, will he donate the salary and the benefits back to the city, back to the taxpayer, so they can make use of it? Since he obviously doesn't need the money, he made that abundantly clear. And number two, if he's not doing it for the money, is he doing it for the reasons that everybody says he is, that Dixie says he is, for just absolute power?
Disgrace circuit judge. He thinks we all forgot. Nobody wants Martin Silver, except for maybe Alex and Joe. They want unchecked power, ABC, anyone but Silver. He resigned in disgrace. Don't vote for Silver. District 2 Commissioner, don't vote for Silver. I can't stand his face.
So the one thing I will say about Zilber, though, is he did have at least an understanding or a handle on a lot of the policy issues. Unfortunately, he won't come down on the right side of those. He'll very much be a part of the Three Amigos and the corrupt cabal of power with Alex Diaz-Leportilla and Joe Carollo. But there is Martin Zilber is not that, but Joe Carollo is. All right. So unlike, say, Sabina Kovo was one of two candidates interviewed by the Miami-Dade Democrats. And with the ounce or droplets of credibility they have left, they decided to endorse her. But I don't know what to say about how strikingly unprepared she is, because at least Zilber understands the issue. But play the first Kovo clip.
You say that you believe that there's corruption occurring in Miami now and it's not going in the right direction. Could you be more specific what you mean when you say that?
I think that there are partnerships. I don't have proof of any of them. It's just a perception. But it's easy. If you analyze how people vote and for what they vote, and who actually helped them and why they vote that way, then it's a clear equation. The thing is that the average voter doesn't have the time to actually go back and say, okay, these people voted, but are they really believers in one project, or are they doing this because of economical interest? As journalists, sometimes we get really frustrated because investigative units don't get enough funding, and we cannot expose many things. So I don't have proof of anything, but I am just concerned.
Boy, this is fucking ponderous, man.
So that was one of her most coherent responses. It was all downhill from there. She could not answer any questions directly. She would revert to some talking points that had nothing to do with the question. She didn't understand any of the basic policy issues about the district or the city that I tried to ask her about. It was extremely frightening that she got a major party endorsement in this in this race. And also, when I come on the show and I talk about corruption, I tell you who's corrupt. I tell you how they're corrupt. I tell you who their bagman or their bagwoman actually is, in case you want to buy curry favor or buy favors from them. And I was trying to think of what this reminded me of. It reminded me of this scene from The Untouchables.
Why do you want to join the force?
To protect and to protect and serve. To protect and.
Please don't search for the yearbook answer, huh? Just tell me what you think.
What I think?
Yeah.
You could help with force.
You can help.
Force.
Huh?
With crime.
Thank you. There goes the next chief of police.
She could still win, to Sean Connery's point there, but
good movie. I'll stop on it every time.
I do have some advice if you want to get your lighters ready by way of song.
Endorsed by the Dems of Miami-Dade, where they're obviously comfy with more of the same freaking bozos. B-O-Z-O bozos. A baker's dozen vying for this thing, but they only interviewed 2 out of 13 and picked Kovo. Please don't vote for Kovo. No, don't vote for Kovo. Well, we're not the world's most intelligent folk, but you gotta use your head and you must be informed as a voter. Voter. She's completely unqualified for this gig. Yeah, she just can wrestle in a fancy wig. Oh, that's Kovo. Please don't vote for Kovo. No, don't vote for Kovo. Well, she's a TV anchor and an entrepreneur, but she's never been a public servant before. She filed for personal bankruptcy. Is that someone we want to handle tax money? In the special election for District 2, I'm not asking you politely, I am telling you, don't vote Kovo. Kovo. No, don't vote for Kovo.
Catchy songs and
Repeat
you've told
chorus.
us who not to vote for.
Yes.
Who should they vote for before we take some calls, before we bring on an archaeologist to tell us how offensive it is that we just build crud over 7,000-year-old stuff. Tell us who to vote for.
My recommendations, though, can't call it an endorsement, is Eddie Leal, and my runner-up is Javier Gonzalez out of the 13 in the District 2 Miami City Commission special election.
We take calls next. The funny thing about the doing of this show, because Billy's been doing very good and hard work around here, being this informed on this many subjects, losing all the time and calling out the million Miami corruptions that are promising you what's coming for America in 20 years, because we're always ahead on this stuff. So Billy's been doing this hard and good work, important work. But he wants to do parody songs and he wants to do calls. He got into this to have some fun while we do it and interact with the audience and do what Neil Rogers was doing in South Florida when in 1980 and 1990 he changed radio in South Florida when we were at the center of this giant division in this town like we are in America. And in wanting to take calls, which is a terrible idea, and he's been wanting to do it for weeks, we somehow haven't been able to get working phone lines around here. Meadowlark Media, ostensibly a multi-million-dollar company, hasn't been able to get phone lines.
Multi-million-dollar middle school TV production studio you have here, Dan.
And so you've been coming in here waiting to take calls, and we haven't been able to serve you.
I have been demanding Alexander Graham Bell level tech in this place, and we've not been able to achieve it.
Just a landline. So
how about 2 cans connected by a string?
Okay,
Anything?
So somebody, Roy, Carl, before we get to the taking of calls, Somebody explain to me, because
Are we taking calls or are calls taking us?
I told Billy, if these phones don't work when I go in there tomorrow, I am going to murder somebody on company property.
You serious?
And when we get in here, I'm told there's a 1 second delay. How is it that we, ostensibly, a multi-million-dollar media company, have so much trouble getting landlines working so that we can take calls?
I was told there was be a latency period. I thought I was talking to Freud, not Roy. He's like, there's going to be a second and a half latency. I'm like, what are you talking about?
All
It's
right.
2023.
Roy, okay, so just so everyone in the audience understands and knows the history of all of what we're doing here. Billy Corben very much wants to do some small portion of the joy that Neil Rogers found when he was doing his solo show in a crazy Miami. Billy was touched, moved, and inspired.
I was touched by Neil Rogers. I was touched by Neil
To
Rogers.
do something like this, to take calls, to make art. And now we've welcomed the phone lines into your echo chamber because
No, but like messy, like shitty Miami art, like burrito. You know, like that's like what I was thinking.
You're right about that.
Yeah, just like a shart, like a David Sampson Marlins home run sculpture shart of a thing.
All right, we got Brian.
Brian, welcome to the program. You're on with Dan and Billy.
This is going great.
We got Steve from Albuquerque.
Steve from Albuquerque, you're on with Dan and Billy.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Steak Sauce.
Hey, steak sauce is happening.
What is up?
All right, Steve, Steak Sauce, you're on with Just Billy. Dan Le Batard has left the building.
Bye, Dan. I love you. Sorry I got you sick at Moss.
That was a super spreader event, if ever there was one. Everybody got gonorrhea.
I think I accidentally sneezed on his birthday cake. So I apologize. All right, Billy, I wanted to ask you about the Solomon Pena case here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Are you?
I'm not. Tell me about it.
Solomon Pena, he ran for a state house seat, a Republican. He lost in a landslide.
And now he's indicted, isn't he?
Concede or what's up?
He's indicted, right?
Yes, he's indicted because he hired men to go shoot at the houses of Democratic elected officials, including two county commissioners, a state senator.
Yes, sir.
So he's he's saying the election was rigged against him. Trump MAGA guy who's at the insurrection.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen.
Have you ever heard of anything like this before?
Yes, I have, because I live in Miami. And as I always like to say, the Miami of today is the America of tomorrow. And from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even into the early zeros, Miami was ground zero. It was the capital of political violence in the country. And we had bombings, we had shootings, we had various uprisings. We had someone attempt to fire a shoulder missile, basically a bazooka, at a Polish freighter right over here in Government Cut by the MacArthur Causeway. He was standing on the causeway, in fact, and fired it. Tony Bosch was his name. And Polish freighter because comunista. And what happened was because Government Cut is so narrow, the missile did not have time to arm itself and instead hit the side of the freighter and just rolled down into the water, plop. But we had bombings of post offices, of cigar shops, bombings of the state attorney's office, FBI headquarters. So we've had a lot of that kind of intrigue down here. We had Emilio Millan, who was a Spanish language talk show radio host in the late 1970s, who had the audacity to go on the air and say that maybe the embargo against Cuba isn't working. They put a bomb in his car, and when he came out from the radio station one day it blew his legs off. So this is, again, the Miami of today is the America of tomorrow, and I think it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. Thanks for your call, Steak Sauce.
Okay. One more thing, Miami. So it happened this recent election cycle is not to that extent, obviously, but Janelle Perez was running, and her the woman she was running against released her number in a blast text to her supporters, encouraging her supporters to basically harass this woman, Janelle Perez, and she received death threats, murder threats. She's a mom. She's a LGBTQ. What was your take on that?
Who are you talking about? Who's the opponent? Yeah.
And I can't remember who she Alexis something.
It's a tough last name to pronounce, isn't it? I don't know that I can do it, to tell you the truth. I think you shouldn't dox people.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think you should dox people online. I don't think you should dox people in political speech or in political ads.
Okay.
Thanks for your call.
Thanks for my call, man. I loved you and Smashing Pumpkins.
Thank you. I get that a lot. So people will tweet me on like Sunday nights, especially. They'd be like, "Dude, what are you doing to poor Dixie? Leave Dixie alone. You're such an asshole." I'm like, "What? Who the hell is Dixie? What are you talking about?" And it turns out like they thought I was Billy Corgan because they're going to Twitter. They're going at Billy COR.
Smashing Pumpkins.
Right, and so he has something to do with wrestling or something, like he got involved.
Dixie Carter from
so
TNA.
so they're like, yeah, so TNA wrestling. So like they're giving me shit for Billy Corgan giving shit to Dixie Carter on TNA wrestling. What are you gonna do?
Boy. All right, we got one more caller. This is Michael.
Michael, you're on Because of Miami with Billy Corben and not Dan Le Batard, who got up and walked out. He threw his headphones down on the desk and stormed right out of here as fast as I've ever seen Dan move in his life.
He was laughing, though.
He was laughing. I'm just glad it was coming out that end. What's going on, Michael?
Hey, Billy. I went to the great college of Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia.
Oh, wow.
I enjoyed the documentary. I'm in the documentary, actually. So I'm still waiting for my royalty check. I was just curious.
Isn't that diploma enough, Michael? Isn't that diploma enough? I hope you kept your receipt so you can get your money back.
I don't know. I was about to say, I don't know. Will you hire me? But anyway, I am curious on, obviously not a Miami person, but when I was getting my hair cut out at a restaurant, I could not see Jerry's face everywhere over TVs everywhere. And I'm wondering how Jerry got around doing all the drinking and all the swinging and all that stuff. And no one recognized him. No one put two and two together in Miami specifically.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so Michael went to Liberty University. My recent documentary, God Forbid, the sex scandal that brought down a dynasty, is in no small part about his university, because Jerry Falwell Jr. and his wife Becky were the now former president and first lady. This is the largest Christian university in the country. And for those who haven't seen the doc yet, and how have you not? It's the most watched doc in the history of Hulu. It is about when they came down here to Miami Beach on vacation at the Fountain Blue. They picked up who was at the time a pool attendant, a pool boy, and they got involved in a 7-year cuckold threesome where the Becky would have sex with Giancarlo Granda, the former pool boy, while Jerry would allegedly watch from the corner. And then they wound up getting into a real estate business with him, and it became this whole sordid affair that may very well have helped to get Donald Trump elected as president of the United States. And the question is how is a guy this famous, second generation Jerry Falwell, whose father was even more famous, how is he running around Miami, visiting swinger clubs, going to very popular nightclubs in Miami, running around Miami Beach, involved in this cuckold threesome with a former pool attendant? How did nobody recognize him? So here's the thing, and it's a line I use pretty often. You know, LA is where you go when you want to be somebody, New York is where you go when you are somebody, and Miami's where you go when you want to be somebody else. It has always been a sunny place for shady people, and it's kind of been one of these, like, if you're not breaking the law, you know, you come on vacation, leave on probation. If you're not breaking the law, you're just coming down here to have fun. It's kind of like what happens in Miami stays in Miami, and at least for a while anyway. And so people don't really know who anybody is down here. You know, our celebrities are not your celebrities. I mean, it's part of the reason why they came down here, Jerry and Becky. It's because obviously they couldn't run around, Lynchburg or the state of Virginia. They would go to New York, they would go to Miami, and they would live their best lives. And nobody recognized them. In fact, Joe Carollo, while they were having dinner at STK Steakhouse, a scene that's depicted in the documentary, he was really nervous. This is something we cut out. Get a deleted scene here today, Michael. He said to them, like, we're out and about, the three of us. Like, isn't this weird? Won't somebody like? He was worried about tabloids, and Jerry assured him. He's like, yeah. He's like, we're kind of famous in our little world, but outside of that bubble, the Liberty bubble, he's like, we can kind of, or the evangelical bubble. He's like, we can kind of, get around and nobody knows who we are.
Interesting. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Billy. And yeah, listen, if you want to hire me, I could use some work.
I love it, Michael. Thank you. I think Dan is actually hiring here at Meadowlark.
Nothing says Super Bowl. Nothing says Super Bowl like talking about bribery and cuckolding and all that good stuff. So,
and shout out Juju Gotti, because everybody's been shouting out Juju Gotti. Juju Gotti, who doubles the Jew in the Super Bowl this year. That's it. There's no more. It's just Juju.
All right, we got one more caller. This is Jay Trotter.
Jay Trotter, you're on Because Miami with Billy Corben and not Dan Le Batard.
Hello, Mr. Corben. How are you?
Jay Trotter.
Wait a minute.
Jay Trotter, Richard. Hang on. Is that Richard Dreyfuss's character from Let It Ride?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course it is.
Yeah, I mean, a Made in Miami movie. They shot that entirely at Gulfstream, I think, right?
Hialeah Park.
No, at Hialeah Racetrack.
Oh, it was Hialeah. Okay, that makes infinitely more sense. The voice sounds really, really familiar. It's not like a whiny Richard Dreyfuss kind of voice, but it is a kind of like whiny David Sampson voice.
It's not a whiny David Sampson voice. It's just a David Sampson voice.
Oh, my God.
How you doing, David Sampson? Are you kicking yourself in the head that you didn't think of selling Marlins tickets at Costco 2 for $49.99 on an end cap?
They wouldn't do a deal with us.
You guys tried.
With you personally?
Of course I'm not kicking myself in the head. That is a Michael Yormark special. And we really didn't want to do it because we didn't want to devalue tickets. We'd rather have an empty stadium than devalue the tickets, especially in the new ballpark. And I guess we may have overplayed our hand.
You didn't want to devalue tickets? You just wanted to devalue the franchise? What was the goal?
Well, I definitely didn't devalue the franchise, so that would not be accurate.
That would not be accurate. And the stadium.
As a matter of fact, thanks to the public money and private partnership that we did, it actually increased the value of the franchise. Thanks to all of you. De Niro. So I had a serious question. How would you not, given your successful career as a movie maker, when are you going to do a movie about public financing of stadiums instead of just whining about it on the air with Dan once a week? Why not actually do a film and learn all about it and entertain people too?
I'm not whining about it. This is my voice. But I will say I feel like all these callers today, I've just been taking pitches for future projects here. One guy, the last caller, called in, and he graduated from Liberty University, and he's looking for a job, this poor bastard. Praise the Lord. God forbid. But I think that's a really, really, really good question, David. And the same way you're kind of putting me on the spot here, I will put you on the spot. And I will say, if I were to direct a documentary about public financing of stadiums, would you do an interview on camera for it?
Absolutely. I will tell you everything that went on in as much sort of detail as you want to try to engage and entertain and inform people about how it really happens, not just how you think it happens.
Oh, shit. I think we're making a movie here. Thanks for calling, David. Those were the Because Miami phone lines, which went too well. I think Carl, who screened these calls?
They screened
Carl did way too good of a job screening those calls. So, Carl, anybody ranting and doing some anti-Semitic or racist rant, you should have let them on. I know you cut them off. I know you did. The next caller is going to be Stephen A, isn't it? We're at that part of the show.
If you've been listening to Because Miami, you know that Billy has been very excited about a find near the Miami River because it is not often you dig up 7,000-year-old things. And Will Pestle is a doctor. He's an anthropologist and archaeologist, and he is at the University of Miami, a professor, Department of Anthropology chair. And Billy, the most exciting parts of this before we get to him are what? Just to cover the ground that you mentioned last week on the show.
I'll let him answer that question in the form of, Doctor, thanks for being here. Give us some perspective here. How old is this find?
Yeah, no, the oldest portions of this site do stretch back in excess of 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years. Now, the excavators don't yet have carbon dates to confirm that, but the artifacts, right, the style of the artifacts that they're finding confirm that they go back to this period that we call the Archaic, which stretches back before 5,000 BC. So we're talking about 7,000, maybe 8,000 years, yet to be determined with precision, but legitimately old by any measure.
So for people who don't know, what is that predate, for example?
So we're talking about something that's older than the pyramids, well older than the pyramids are from 3000 BC, so 5,000 years ago, right? The Roman Empire heyday was 2,000 years ago. So we're talking about something that's nearly as old as some of the first cities in the world, right? The cities that arose in Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 years ago. So we're talking about something that goes back, to the period of the dawn of civilization.
So Miami, which is sort of famous or notorious, I should say, for having, quote unquote, no history, this transient population, this lack of institutional memory, suddenly the mouth of the Miami River is the location of perhaps one of the oldest civilizations in the history of mankind.
How is this possible? I can't imagine.
I get chills thinking about
this area being any kind of inhabitable back then. It doesn't seem like it would have been inhabitable 100 years ago.
It won't be inhabitable 5,000, 7,000 years from now. Not 7,000 years ago, Dan.
It won't be inhabitable 50 or 70 years from now. No, I think the issue here, right, is what you point out, right? You walk around the streets of Miami and you don't see the history, right? The oldest buildings here are 1920s, right? The founding of the city, quote unquote, goes back to the 19th century. And because we don't see the history, we don't appreciate the depth of the history. And because we don't appreciate it, we don't preserve it, which leads us right back to the point where we are now, where there's this site that's incredible, that's emerging, from the soil in Brickell, and it looks like large portions of it will not be preserved, or any of it at this point, honestly.
So as we do in Miami, we knock down an old building with the intention of building a new building, but there are laws along the Miami River because finds like this, not quite this old, have been made in the past, and we found a way in some way or another to preserve some of them, certainly not all of them. So, Doctor, talk to me a little bit about what do the laws require as far as archaeology is concerned, and what don't they require, which is what's creating this kind of tension right now about what the future holds.
Yeah, they require, unfortunately, very little, right? Much of the power, in this case of historic preservation, is in the hands of the city. And while the city does have, the city of Miami, and while the city of Miami does have an ordinance that speaks to historic preservation, and a board that oversees this Historic and Environmental Preservation Board, if you read the ordinances, it all says the board may do this, the board may do that, right? There are very few hard and fast obligations. And so what has been preserved over the last 70 years of archaeological work around the mouth of the river has been done quasi-voluntarily, right? So, or when there's been a moment of public outcry, right? The legal response has followed that. So now, contrarily, the board has broad latitude, right? They have a lot of discretion. They could put all sorts of different conditions on the developer who's developing this parcel, such that portions of the site, how about this? Never get disturbed, right? You put a green space and you say, we're not even going to put a shovel in the ground there because we need to keep 25% of it.
Green space in Brickell. What the hell are you talking about? That's
yeah,
crazy.
I know. This is running counter to everything that we understand. Or what about this? And I mean, I find it, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but Baccarat's going to be building this hotel, right? This is going to be the Baccarat Hotel and Residences. What do they make? Crystal. What could you make the floor of a building out of such that you could see the stuff that is beneath it? Glass, right? Like this, you could walk into the lobby of this hotel and residence, right? And you could look down and see the history of the city going back centuries and millennia. And I mean, I would find that interesting, but I'm a nerd. But I imagine like a lot of people would find that.
There is something between cruel and criminal about the idea of finding something this historic and us having no land out here and land being really expensive right now. So of course you develop on it. I've got to imagine, Will, that this is more offensive to you than it is to most people. Just the idea that you're actually saying out loud, hey, we might not be able to preserve any of this.
No, and I mean, I got to a point, and not to get too in the weeds, but there's two parcels that are being developed right now. Right, one is sort of well on its way to being destroyed and paved over. There's another one where the building hasn't even come down yet, so there's potential. And at some point in this process, a lot of us have just sort of had to make our peace with the fact that we're going to lose half of what's being exposed right now. Like that, the ship has sailed on in situ preservation, right? And like in terms of preserving and displaying what's in the ground. Now, there's a lot of promise, right, in this other parcel, and that's where we're really trying to focus our efforts, working with the city to see that some sort of good outcome can come from the part that hasn't yet been developed. But no, it hurts, right? And what hurts more is that we act like this is like rocket science or brain surgery. Like development and historical preservation coexist all over the world, right? Like you can go to cities around the world and see modern buildings on top of, next to ancient structures, right? This doesn't require us inventing like a new field of science. This is simply implementing good ideas that already work elsewhere. So it's like we're limited by our imagination in some way, which is really bothersome.
It's certainly very troubling, the fact that this may lie in the hands of the city of Miami, which is to make an understatement, is developer friendly and, let's say, not entirely interested in preserving our history here, modern, let alone ancient. So my question is, what, if any, role might the county play? I know Alex Pinellas, the mayor of the county back in the late 90s, was very influential in salvaging one of the few green spaces and parks in the entire Brickell neighborhood, which is now known as the Miami Circle. This may be as much as 5,000 years older than that fine. But what role might the county play, and what role might the state play, and what role, if this is really of this great significance, might the feds play?
So I think the problem here is that, because of a lot of sort of the home rule provisions, as I understand it, the county has divested a lot of the power to the city. And unless the city is in like gross violation of its own ordinances, right? Like the county passes the power to the city and says, as long you have to set up a board, you have to have historic preservation ordinances, and unless they were to like nuke that entire structure, I don't think the county would step in. The state has a very limited purview, right? The state can only step in because of state statutes on private land in Florida when human remains are involved, when unmarked burials are involved. And in that case, they have fulfilled those legal responsibilities. But beyond that, their power passes to the county, to the city. And so we're sort of left where our best hope, right, is are aligning these local ordinances. And honestly, lie in the residents of the city of Miami to like apply pressure, right? And so if there are other people that care, and based on the response that we've seen to the stories, there are lots of people that care, right? Start writing to your city officials. Show up at the public meetings. The HEP board is meeting on April 4th in City Hall. Show up, right? And be there if you're concerned about this, because otherwise, like you say, it's just going to be the same thing repeated again and again.
Can you explain to us, for perspective, Will, the last time you were this stunned by a find in Miami, excited about a find in Miami? Give the people an understanding of how appalling it would be to not preserve this thing we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I think this feels like Groundhog Day, right? We did this 8-10 years ago with Met Square, which was the site on the north side of the river, right? So just across the river, just across the Brickell Avenue Bridge there. And at that site, what ended up happening was very late in the game, after the archaeologists had finished their work on the site, there was some pressure applied such that the developer had to make some concessions, right, in terms of how they structured the building. A little bit was preserved in situ, right, so the public could see it. But this is like closing the barn door after the cows have gotten out, right? What I don't understand is we could be setting these plans in place before we tear down the building and start building the new one, and then we're not inventing stuff on the fly. We're not letting like chaos sort of dictate our plans.
Doc, to Dan's point, though, I asked, talking about the mouth of the Miami River, I heard someone describe this, because the Tequesta people, little is really known about them other than when we make discoveries like this, and it really seems like right here at the mouth of the Miami River, this was the capital of these people, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And we know that because in the early 16th century, right, Ponce de Leon visits the site, right, and talks to the people and documents the fact that they are the Tequesta people. That's what they call themselves. They called that site Tequesta. But we have to remember that these were otherwise prehistoric peoples, right? They didn't have a system of writing for their language, which means all that we know about them, we either know from the Spanish, and we know that those accounts are biased just because of cultural differences and colonial imperatives and those sorts of things. And archaeology is the only other way that we can reconstruct anything about these people. And so if the archaeologists aren't able to study the site, if the artifacts aren't preserved, analyzed thoroughly, and then if we don't tell the public about it, we're never going to learn anything more about the Tequesta people.
So where are we right now in terms of that? What do we have? What do we know? What are we going to see? What are we going to get to study or not?
As it stands right now, what will happen is that the archaeological contract firm, so there's a company that does archaeology for at the behest of the developer, will excavate the materials, and they're doing a good job of excavation in the main, right? From what I've seen, they will warehouse all this stuff, and they'll write a really cursory final report. They'll say there's this many bones, there's this many pieces of ceramic, but what they won't do is they won't study the material the way that academic archaeologists would, right? Where we're going to spend a huge amount of time, huge amount of effort, huge amount of money to extract every little bit of information we can, right? So these objects, you talk about Indiana Jones, right? We started there. This will be like that last scene where everything is just stuck away in a warehouse.
Yeah, where do they go?
Never studied.
They belong in a museum.
Exactly, you got it, right? So that's where we are, right? This stuff is just going to sit there gathering dust, and we're going to be stuck with this pernicious lie, right? That the city of Miami has no history, that it's a new city, that it's a young city, which then enables us to destroy the history. And I don't think it's coincidental that we're destroying histories that are inconvenient to development, right? Like stories of people who otherwise, kind of might stand in the way of quote unquote progress.
If people are upset about this, we will give you an address and maybe some email contacts here before the end of the segment to get you to be able to write people in power to express your displeasure. But before you get out of here, Will, just explain to them why their displeasure should be what it is. I don't need you to cut a wrestling promo, but I need you to explain to them. I need you to explain to them why,
I need him to do that.
Why they need to be pissed off about this. And you, as somebody who has dedicated your life to the study of these things, I don't want you to be numb to it. Like, what's your level of rage on this?
I mean, this is, I've got a day job, right? I'm teaching hundreds of undergraduate students. I've got my own research program, and this is the thing that keeps me up at nights, right? Like, this is the thing that I'm truly deeply worried about, because what we've seen, right, is this like death by 1,000 cuts at the mouth of the river, right? This building's been built, this building's been built, this building's been built. And pretty soon there's not going to be any of that Tequesta site left intact for us to study, interpret, preserve for the future. And so, I think that, again, and I sense that there's like a moment here where people are starting to get fed up with this like unfettered development, this sort of like seeming chaos as the city sort of grows beyond all levels of reason. And I would hope that, as we think about this in the kind of city that we want to live in, maybe we want to live in a city that actually plans for the future, but also respects the past, right? And again, these are not mutually exclusive things. That you can do both. We can walk and chew gum here, people, and we can make sure that this site and sites like it are respected and preserved for the long term. It's totally doubleable. If, again, Miami's not such a big city. Like the city of Miami, populace wise, it's 750,000 people, the city, a couple thousand people right there. Their representatives in city government write the HEP board. I think that can actually help apply the necessary pressure to see that a better outcome is actually obtained for this site.
All right. Thank you, Will. We will give people some of the places they can contact us in a second. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the attention to this. And again, we can only be optimistic and hope for a good outcome here, but it's going to require a lot of work from a lot of people. So thanks for making it known. I do appreciate it.
This is like the very like embodiment, the symbol of like everything that I talk about this town.
No, it's terrible.
This is like
it's really
when we
terrible.
talk about just the being one of the youngest cities in the country. America's kind of like perpetual belligerent teenager who doesn't want the old shit. They want the new shit, and the consequences of that are that we'll never see any of this ever again on the earth. And it's happening in the worst possible city in the world. Like he said, there are places where this gets done, and this gets done well, and it gets done effectively. And there is that marriage between the future and progress and embracing the past. And this is just the absolute worst town for this to be happening in. And it would be less treacherous if it were the county or the state. But the fact that it's the city of Miami who is now responsible for this, I mean, they don't call it our Emmy, Dan.
I got the joke. All sorts of things around here that we regularly get pissed off about weekly. But let's do something, Roy, to at least bring more attention to this and see if you can shake some of the powers that make decisions on stupid stuff in Miami. Where can the listener who is bothered by what they just heard, where can they contact a city manager, an email address, a telephone number? Give us some information.
All right, the city manager is Arthur Noriega, and that's Art Noriega. It's 305-250-5400, or you can email them at Noriega, that's ANORIEGA, at miamigov.com.
So we should do that. Let's repeat it one more time just so that people don't even have to go back and rewind the podcast. Just give those numbers out again so that our listeners can bombard these people with, outrage.
All right, the phone number is 305-250-5400, or you can email ANORIEGA at miamigov.com. You are trying to contact Art Noriega, city manager.
He cannot wait to hear from you, I assure you.
Tell the people goodbye, Billy.
Goodbye, Billy. Cocaine's. Today's Miami Moment is a commercial for Shark Bites snack crap that I did when I was a little kid on Key Biscayne at Crandon Park.
So it's totally self-involved?
Totally. It's my Flashback Friday.
You just wanting to just show off to the people that you were a child star once upon a time, and you failed your way into
there
this?
There was nothing. I failed right up into this. There is nothing star-like about this, as you will see, but I didn't have a Miami moment today, so I decided to make it a Flashback Friday.
How old were you?
Oh, I don't know. Single digits.
I'm hungry. I'm bored. Wow! Shark Bite! An action sub!
Action sub free inside Shark Bites fruit snacks. Just add baking powder and watch it dive and surface.
Here's the baking powder.